Welcome to Mickey, Marvel, and More, Disney news, commentary, and opinion. From theme parks to Thanos and from Skywalker to Skyliner, my family and I will discuss it all. So let's go!
Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.
Hello, Mark here, and welcome to another episode of Mickey, Marvel, and More. Thanks so much for taking time out of this crazy hot summer to hang out with us here. Hopefully you're somewhere nice and air-conditioned to listen to our latest little dog and pony show. I also hope that you were able to stay cool over the 4th of July holiday weekend that just happened, because it was definitely the hottest 4th of July in quite some time here in the Midwest, and on the East Coast, and in the South. And if you're in Walt Disney World right now, welcome to the surface of the sun. And it was thinking about the 4th of July and the Disney theme parks this last weekend that inspired this episode's family chat. Historically, Disney always rolls out the red carpet to celebrate the 4th of July in its American theme parks every year. And as we told you in a news story a few episodes back, they're going to do all kinds of special things to celebrate the 250th celebration of our nation all year long. And that really made us think about the kind of things that Disney does in its theme parks, not just over special holidays, but the kind of things they do in their theme parks every day to help celebrate and teach people about U.S. history. You might be surprised just how much they do, and it's not just the obvious. Join us in the family chat to talk about what Disney does to celebrate America every day. But before we get to that, how about a little news from in and around the Disneyverse?
Oh, he's doing his own theme music? Big, dumb, and tone deaf. I am so glad I was unconscious for all of this.
Mission accomplished.
First up, a tale of some crime in Walt Disney World. Cue up the song Bad Boys from the Cops TV show. Not really. Are you kidding? We can't afford to pay the rights to that song. Just ask our friends of the show about their quote-unquote rights and privileges that go along with it. This latest crime comes from the files of This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things, People. Walt Disney World has moved more of their highly sought-after mystery pins behind locks after a Florida man stole over $900 worth of them a few weeks ago. Guests can still grab most open edition pins themselves, but they have to ask cast members to help with the mystery packs. The change was first spotted over at Discovery Trading Company at Disney's Animal Kingdom and at the World of Disney store at Disney Springs. Mystery boxes and bags now have red locks in front of them that only a cast member can open. There are supposed to be 1 or 2 cast members stationed nearby with keys, but we'll see how long that lasts. Limited edition pins remain available at checkout counters as usual. Cast members confirmed that the change was prompted by a 27-year-old man stealing 50 Disney trading pins valued at approximately $922 from Disney Springs. The man was arrested for grand theft, which is a third-degree felony, and taken to jail. While not a super surprising move to put high-value items behind a lock in a retail store, I mean, have you ever tried to buy blades for your shavers at Target? This is just one more hoop to jump through to purchase an item in a location that is always busy. Do better, people. And speaking of crime in Disney Springs, we have sort of a non-update on a story we've been following for quite some time now. The only reason I even bring it up, even though there's nothing new to say about it, it's because we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the event. For the regular listeners of Mickey, Marvel, and More, you probably have an idea of the crime that I'm talking about. For those that aren't, I'm talking about the Paddlefish burglar at Disney Springs. This is a story that we first told you about last summer. Back on September 16th, 2025, around midnight, a man in scuba gear swam to the Paddlefish restaurant in Disney Springs, climbed on board, blacked out the security cameras while wearing face coverings, and without even brandishing a weapon, ordered the employees down on the ground, and because they had been counting the money from the end of the night, the criminals stole between $10,000 and $20,000. Whoever it was then re entered the water and swam off into the night. As of right now, there is no new information about this case. I just find it a fascinating crime story. And since the crime happened almost a year ago, I am super surprised that nobody has been caught yet. It really feels like it was probably an inside job, meaning somebody definitely had a working knowledge of the system at the Paddlefish restaurant to know exactly when to show up and where to go. We haven't done it yet, so I'll post a link to a picture in the show notes from the security camera right before whoever it was blacked out the image. But the person's face is really well covered, and the whole thing really feels like something out of a Mission Impossible movie. We will continue to monitor this story and keep you updated on the bubbling burglar, the paddlefish pilferer, the scuba scofflaw. We haven't really landed on a title for this yet, but it looks like we're going to have plenty of time to workshop it before they catch who's ever responsible for this. Mickey, Marvel, and more will always keep you posted about any crime activities in the Disney theme parks, so stay tuned.
That man is playing Galaga. Thought we wouldn't notice, but we did.
As December 18th, 2026 gets closer and closer, the road to Doomsday continues. One of the things planned on this road to Doomsday is the re-release of Avengers Endgame in theaters this September. The re-release will now be called Avengers Endgame Encore. While at Cinema Europe in Barcelona, the official convention for International Union of Cinemas and Exhibitors, representatives for Disney confirmed it will also come with a custom introduction, new footage, and a special end tag that will be exclusive to Infinity Vision and IMAX releases. Disney announced Infinity Vision earlier this year at CinemaCon in April. It's a new certification for premium large format theaters that will signify to audiences which auditoriums offer the biggest, brightest, and most immersive cinematic experiences. This Infinity Vision, sorry to laugh about this, but it reminds me of the movie gimmicks from the 1950s like Smell-O-Vision. Anyway, this new tech will debut with Avengers Endgame Encore, which is scheduled to hit screens this summer on September 25th. As of this week, Infinity Vision reports they've received more than 7,500 applications from global exhibitor screens seeking certification. Joe and Anthony Russo, the directors behind Avengers Endgame, are back in the Marvel fold as filmmakers behind Avengers Doomsday in December. Speaking at the Sands Film Festival in St. Andrews, Scotland this past April, Joe Russo told the audience that the Endgame re-release will include footage that is set in the Doomsday story. They go on to say it's an opportunity to create a bridge from Endgame to Doomsday in a very unique way. He also described the re-release as a critical companion and a setup for what you're going to see in December when you watch Avengers Doomsday. Well, according to what they're saying, it really sounds like it's worth seeing Avengers Endgame Encore this summer, and at a bare minimum, you're going to need to see it on an IMAX screen to make sure you see the extra tag. And if you're super lucky, you'll also be able to see it in Smell-O-Vision. Stick with us here on Mickey, Marvel, and more as we keep you up to date with all of the info available on the road to Doomsday.
We welcome you to the living seas. We welcome you to Seabase Alpha.
And finally, some more of our favorite news here on Mickey, Marvel, and more, baby animal news. Young manatee Soleil, who arrived at Epcot in February, has been released back into the wild after a brief rehabilitation. Soleil was orphaned and moved to the seas at Epcot for short-term care. It was noticed by visitors that her name was no longer on the chalkboards at Epcot's manatee tank. When asked, the cast member said that Soleil was relocated to Willaca, Florida. The town is on the St. Johns River, where rehabilitated manatees are frequently released and can thrive thanks to its fresh vegetation. While we are sad to see Soleil go, we are so happy that she is happy and healthy and living her best life. But while Soleil may be gone, Tanimura and Cider, two other orphan manatees that we've talked about on our show before, remain at the seas at Epcot. Both have successfully gained weight in the past few months. Tanny is now 550 pounds, and Cider comes in at a whopping 1,055 pounds. Tanny arrived as a baby last summer at about 300 pounds. Cider is a few years older and arrived in early 2025 at 750 pounds. If Tanny and Cider are still there in August when we visit Walt Disney World, we will definitely stop by the seas at Epcot and say hi. As always, Mickey, Marvel, and more will continue to bring you all the big and tiny Disney animal news, so stick with us.
And we've also got a big musical finale from Sam Eagle. Sam, what's it about?
It's called A Salute to All Nations, but mostly America.
Great.
The big 4th of July weekend is come and gone, and the Disney theme parks were filled with all the pomp and circumstance that they usually are, as well as all of the ongoing attractions and entertainment that they have that are going to continue for the rest of the year for the 250th celebration of our nation. Like, for example, the new Soaring Over America film and the Soarin' attraction in the Land Pavilion at Epcot, and in Disney's California Adventure over at the Disneyland Resort. But did you know that there were all kinds of things that you can see and do across all of the American Disney theme parks that pay tribute to U.S. history and patriotism all year, every year? Well, that's just what we're going to talk about in the family chat. Joining me to talk about all this is my longtime co-host and lovely wife, Laura.
Happy to be here.
So glad to have you back. So we've just come off of the big 4th of July weekend, and we were kind of talking about all of the things that Disney was doing this weekend and for the 250th, but we also started thinking about all of the things that they do all of the time for patriotism and U.S. history in all of the American theme parks. And really, it kind of goes back to Walt, because Walt was a huge patriot and a huge supporter of everything American and American innovation and technologies. So I guess it's no surprise that he started inserting those things into Disneyland Park when he built it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I know when I think about patriotism in the Disney parks, the thing that pops up in my mind first is the Hall of Presidents.
100%.
And I think because it has been there for so long and it's such an iconic attraction, people don't tend to visit it very often, I think.
That's fair.
I know.
Except for the air conditioning.
Yeah, it's got primo air conditioning for sure. But I know we don't always visit it every time. But when I do, I'm always really impressed by how wonderful the attraction is.
Oh, yeah.
And when you really start thinking about all of the detail and all of the various elements that go into that attraction, it really is a pretty wonderful tribute to patriotism in several different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So the building itself, if you didn't know, is a building styled after Philadelphia's Independence Hall. And so the tribute to America starts from the moment that you are even walking, inside the building. First of all, there are a number of pre-show exhibits in the lobby. And I will recommend don't skip those.
Yeah.
I know people tend to want to beeline right for the theater seats and to sit down, and they are comfortable theater seats. I'll give you that. But it is well worth your time to spend a few minutes before you go into the theater looking around the pre-show exhibits. They contain some authentic presidential artifacts, such as some dresses worn by some of the first ladies, and also some really significant U.S. historical paintings that really help set the tone for the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
The film itself is actually developed by some Pulitzer Prize-winning historians, and the film covers the formation from the U.S. Constitution through some of the struggles of our country's origins. If you haven't been to the attraction for a while, you may not realize that there is also a section that is somewhat similar to Disneyland's Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln,
Right.
in that the curtain parts at one point during the Civil War segment of the film, and you have an audio animatronic Abraham Lincoln who actually rises up from his chair and then gives the full Gettysburg Address.
Right. The entire impetus for the Hall of Presidents began with the Lincoln animatronic from way back in the World's Fair, which we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Right. Then the part of the Hall of Presidents that I think most people think of is the presidential roll call, where they go through and they introduce every single U.S. president who is represented by an audio animatronic figure and who acknowledges the audience with some kind of a wave or a nod or a fidget or a scratch. They've got to be running out of movements. I don't know.
Right.
But each of the presidents addresses the audience with a little acknowledgement after their name is called. To sort of cap out the rest of the attraction, again, if you haven't been there for a while, there are also a lot of recorded remarks and recitations of the oath of office delivered by George Washington and the current sitting president. So it's kind of a nice way to tie that all together, both past and present.
Yeah, whenever there is a new president elected, they always shut the attraction down for a period of time to install a brand new president. And I think I don't know how far this goes back, but the modern presidents have all recorded their own dialogue for their speeches and things that they want to say. Or if they're not recording specifically for the attraction, they will take segments of their speeches and use them in the attraction to sort of highlight the new president. And the new president is always featured right in the middle of the stage. The other thing that's really, really cool about the Hall of Presidents in the Magic Kingdom, it is one of only 2 places authorized by the U.S. Congress to publicly display the official seal. The seal is located on the floor in the main lobby in the waiting area, and it's cordoned off by like sort of a red carpet style rope, but it is one of the only 2 places in the U.S. where you can find it. And it's really interesting because it took an act of Congress for them to be able to display the seal. Disney actually had to petition the U.S. Congress, and that to me is just fascinating that they had to have an act of Congress to get this thing installed on the carpet.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and the seal is only legally displayed in a handful of authorized locations, with the White House and the Hall of Presidents being just 2 of the most notable public examples. And to me, that is incredibly fascinating that Walt Disney World is the location of one of those seals.
Yeah. Well, that just goes to show you what kind of a commitment to authenticity that Walt Disney and the Imagineers had. And I think that kind of leads us into the next area that I think about when I think of patriotism in U.S. history in the theme parks, and that's the whole Liberty Square area in Magic Kingdom. When you stop and think about it, that whole area is really set in 18th century America, and it really is an attempt at some immersive storytelling.
Yeah.
This is one of the original areas to Walt Disney World. It opened October 1st, 1971, with the rest of the park. And sometimes people may not really take the time to stop and look at the buildings in Liberty Square because it's a little bit of a pass-through, I think.
It is, to get through to the quote-unquote much larger attractions.
Right,
It's just an entry point.
Yeah, you're on your way to the Haunted Mansion or you're on your way to Big Thunder Mountain back in Frontierland. But if you take a few minutes and really spend some time in Liberty Square, there are some pretty amazing recreations of significant historical attractions or tributes to our nation's founding. So one of those is the Liberty Bell. And there is an exact replica of the original Liberty Bell in Philadelphia that is cast from the same mold, and it stands prominently in the middle of Liberty Square.
I didn't realize it was from the exact same mold.
I didn't know that either.
Wow.
Then if you look up in the windows of one of the buildings that faces Liberty Square, you will see 2 glowing lanterns in the window, which is a nod to Paul Revere's famous "One if by land, 2 if by sea."
Right. I that's something that I'd forgotten about until we started doing this research, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to look for that the next time we go there because I completely forgot about it. And speaking of the buildings, this is one that I never knew until we did this. I was doing this research. The crooked shutters. So this is fascinating. The buildings in the Liberty Square area feature sagging, leather-hinged shutters because during the Revolutionary War, colonists repurposed their metal hinges from their shutters for ammunition, forcing them to use leather replacements. So all of the shutters then would sag because eventually the leather would stretch.
Yeah,
To me,
neat.
that is just attention to detail
Yeah.
that I don't think that anybody even realizes is there.
Right.
And it just shows you that Disney really does go all out when they try to get the details. And there's also the huge, which is right in the middle of the area, a huge Liberty tree. It's a massive 130-year-old live oak tree, and it sits right in the center, and it's adorned with 13 lanterns to represent the original colonies. And
Yeah.
that's another one that people just kind of walk by and think, oh, it's just a shade tree. It's not that important, but it's really part of the atmosphere.
Yeah. Of course, the Hall of Presidents is located in
Right.
Liberty Square. And I mentioned before that there's that really neat museum in the lobby.
Mhm.
And in fact, one of the most significant historical artifacts are a pair of George Washington's actual shoe buckles.
Right? It's kind of like a little piece of the Smithsonian right there in Disney World.
Yeah. If you take another minute and just kind of look around at the buildings and the architectural style, they represent actually several of the architectural styles that would have been used back in during the colonial period. So there's everything from the Dutch New Amsterdam style, which would have been located in what's now New York, near Sleepy Hollow, to Georgian styles at Ye Olde Christmas Shop, which is something that you might have seen in more of the southern colonies.
So this next item is an item that I taught the kids years ago, and it is one piece of U.S. history that has stuck with our children over all of these years. And I guarantee you, not many people know this. But if you look down at the ground, of course, you've got the paving stones that make the cobblestone walkways. But going through the middle of it is just sort of this zigzaggy, wavy brown part of the concrete that looks like a little river or a little creek. And I never knew until years ago what it actually represented. And believe it or not, it represents the Poop River. Now, let me
Yes,
explain.
it does.
It's part of U.S. history, and it's really fascinating that they bothered to put this detail.
Mm-hmm.
It's a winding pavement that runs down the middle of the walkways, and it represents what the raw sewage and waste that colonial Americans used to dump from their chamber pots directly into the street.
Yep.
And to this day, the kids will talk about it. And of course, kids, they're old, they're adults now, but they still will try not to step in it or step over it. So the next time you're in Liberty Square, beware of the Poop River.
Yeah, luckily it's just a representation.
Right.
And Disney didn't go super authentic with that detail.
Well, and they didn't do the thing where like they pump out the smell of popcorn into the streets in Main Street to make Liberty Square just a little more authentic.
No.
And we had touched on this briefly a few minutes ago, but we were talking about the great moments with Mr. Lincoln in Disneyland. This is a stage show that features an audio animatronic representation of Abraham Lincoln. And originally, Walt Disney always had a Hall of Presidents type display in his mind when they built Disneyland, but the tech wasn't there yet. So they used the money that was given to them by the World's Fair to create an attraction. And so Walt took this time, okay, Abraham Lincoln is my favorite president. Let's make a full-fledged audio animatronic human being. And for the first time they did and created Abraham Lincoln. And it was for the Illinois State Pavilion in the World's Fair in 1965. And people were wowed by it because not only did he talk and speak, he stood up out of his chair and gave the rest of the presentation. And the great moments of Mr. Lincoln has undergone several changes and advances with the audio animatronics over the years to make it better. And currently, it now shares a spot with the Walt Disney Show, where they have the new Walt Disney animatronic in Disneyland. So they alternate the Walt Disney Show and the Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln show. But the show itself with President Lincoln is still very much authentic to the way it was in 1965 at the World's Fair. And in 1966, they moved it to Disneyland. It's been there ever since.
So moving to a little different area of Magic Kingdom, I wanted to talk for just a minute about Main Street. And, you know, Main Street exists both in Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom and in Disneyland Park. And it represents what turn of the century small town America looked like.
Right.
And that time period was specifically chosen because Walt himself was born in 1901, and it was meant to evoke this sense of nostalgia that, would have represented the time period that Walt's parents and grandparents would have been alive. Interesting note, there's been some talk, and I mean, this is just rumor and speculation, but some talk about whether or not Main Street USA needs to be updated so that it reflects the current generation's representation of small town America for their parents and grandparents.
I think
which
that
I
would
guess
be a
would
horrible
be something
idea.
like the 1950s.
Right.
So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. I'd heard that rumor from some Disney prognosticators and just thought that was an interesting concept that apparently has been kind of tossed around.
I would not want to see that at all, because that's one of the parts of the parks that I think needs to stay the way it always has been.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, something else that has remained the same since both Disneyland and Disney World opened is the flag retreat ceremony. It occurs in both parks every day at 5 p.m. And if you don't know, the parks host, in both locations, a formal flag retreat ceremony that happens. It's usually accompanied by patriotic music, either from the Disneyland Band or the Dapper Dans. And there is usually a chosen military veteran that is honored every single day as part of that flag retreat ceremony. The Pledge of Allegiance is recited, and the American flag is lowered in a formal ceremony as it's retired every day. We've seen this flag retreat ceremony in full a couple of times.
We have.
Usually we'll catch a part of it, but we've seen the full thing a couple of times. And it really is a very nice ceremony and sort of reminds you a little bit about what Main Street USA and the Liberty Square and the patriotic parts of the park are all about.
Yeah, one more thing I wanted to mention, and this one's completely changing, the Carousel of Progress. It just had its last day of operation on Sunday of the 4th of July weekend. And they're closing it down to totally revamp it to be brought up to different decades, but it's still going to cover U.S. history in a sense, because it talks about what happens in those decades. So, you had the 20s and the 30s, and then, of course, the future, which was generically 80s, 90s, 2000s there at the end, where they kind of tried to cram a few things in. But they're going to change the show now, so it will be, I still cannot believe that the decade we grew up in is now going to be featured in the Carousel of Progress.
I know.
If I wasn't ready to take my Doan's back pills and schedule my colonoscopy, I am now. But it's still going to represent U.S. history. And I think that it's cool that they're going to not just get rid of the Carousel of Progress, but update it. And I think that is a great idea. And I'm so happy to see that this attraction that was built for the 1965 World's Fair is going to continue in a different form, but it's still going to be there. And I think that's great. Another thing that I think a lot of people overlook or don't think about it being part of U.S. history are the railroads and train stations in Disneyland and in Magic Kingdom. It's not just the fact that these are real, authentic steam trains, and it represents, an era of transportation in the U.S. that doesn't exist anymore, but it really shows people how those machines actually worked. And inside of those train stations are maps and pieces of documents that talk about the creation of the railroads, and it's sort of like a little mini museum, and they have little pieces of history and rail pins and all the kind of things you can talk about. And it's like a little museum exhibit in there, and it's really cool to think that they have sort of a mini museum dedicated to the U.S. railroads, and it's right there in the train stations in Magic Kingdom and in Disneyland.
Yeah, if you take a minute and look around, you can really find some interesting educational historical information in a lot of these attractions.
I think that a lot of people, particularly ones that are going to Disney World and the ones that aren't there very often, are just rushing to get to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So I think that it really, if you just take a little bit of extra time, you'll really be able to soak in some of this history. And I think it's really cool that it's there to begin with.
Yeah, so let's jump on over to a different park where there's also a nice tribute to U.S. history and Americana, and that's over in Epcot in World Showcase at the America Pavilion, and specifically the American Adventure attraction. So if you've never seen it, it's a really incredible 30-minute theatrical show that combines 35 audio animatronic figures, some huge moving sets, some really neat lighting effects, and a massive 72-foot movie screen. And it talks about the history of life in the United States. Two of the really standout audio animatronics in this presentation are Benjamin Franklin and Mark Twain, who serve as the attraction's hosts, but also are some of the most active audio animatronic figures that exist anywhere in the parks. It's pretty cool. The time periods that are covered in this movie are everything from the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the Industrial Revolution, the Great Depression, and the show features lots of famous historical figures such as Susan B. Anthony, Frederick Douglass, Chief Joseph, and Teddy Roosevelt, just to name a few. Aside from the really impressive audio animatronics, the film is really well done, and the musical score is also really inspiring.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think that, this show's been around for a while now, and they do update the gears and gizmos inside of the animatronics to make them better, but they're still essentially the same that they were when they were first installed. But the fact that, Mark Twain smokes his cigar and they actually, Benjamin Franklin walks up a flight of stairs.
Yeah.
I mean, to think that these are bolted down animatronics and they are able to replicate all these lifelike human movements, as well as this huge production show that I think a lot of people overlook it and think, well, it's just, we've already have the Hall of Presidents. I've already been there. I don't need to see this. If you miss out on this, you're missing out on a huge tribute to the United States and U.S. history, as well as some really incredible animatronics and giant set pieces that rotate around and raise and they float down the river. And it's just such a well done, well executed show that I think it is something to not be missed. At least if it's your only trip going, treat yourself and go see this show.
Plus, primo air conditioning and really comfortable seats.
It is, and I don't know if we've said this before on the show, it is the best air conditioning on site.
Yeah.
We've gone into the lobby just to have a snack and sit at the little tables before, just to be able to cool off. Yeah. But not only is the air conditioning primo, there is also some great entertainment available in the lobby.
Yeah, even if you don't have the time to stay for the 30-minute presentation, there are other things to do just in the lobby of the American Adventure attraction. And one of those is one of my favorites. It's Voices of Liberty. That's the a cappella singing group that sings songs that represent Americana, everything from traditional music back from colonial times through more modern songs. But for the most part, they tend to sing those historical songs. And when you combine these professional a cappella singers with the amazing acoustics in the lobby, it really is something that makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck.
It is such an incredible show. If you are at all interested in music or a cappella singing, this is not to be missed. It's a really short show, but it is a great show and a great opportunity to experience some very, very talented singers. And the acoustics, like you said, are amazing. Plus, the air conditioning.
Yeah.
This is a no-lose scenario for you.
There's no designated seating or particular area. There's spots for kids and adults to sit on the floor. There are a few benches and chairs that are around the exterior, but you can kind of come and go during the performance as well if you don't want to stick around for the whole thing. But I assure you, once you start listening to the Voices of Liberty, you won't want to stop and you will watch the entire thing.
Yeah, it's really great. And not only do they have an entertaining musical show in this lobby, they also have a mini museum and they have rotating art exhibits that are there. And right now, they are still featuring the former US President George W. Bush's art exhibit. It's called Portraits of Courage, a Commander's Tribute to American Warriors. And it's really sort of his post 9/11 tribute to all of the people that came together to work together after the horrible events of 9/11. And he hand painted all these pictures himself. And they've been in the lobby for quite some time. And I think a lot of people don't even realize they're there.
Yeah, there are 60 hand painted oil portraits. He's a very talented portrait painter. And the other thing that's really cool is he actually wrote a little biography or other note about each one of these paintings to explain who the person is and why their portrait has been painted. So aside from just taking a look at some really good portrait painting, there's also very compelling stories that go along with each and every one of those portraits.
There's also a museum right next to all of those paintings, and it features an exhibit called Creating Tradition, Innovation, and Change in American Indian Art. And it's really cool. It's all these art exhibits and pieces of jewelry and clothing, all about Native Americans and their artifacts and artwork from across 7 geographic regions of the U.S. And it's a really, really neat little museum.
Yeah, so when you're craving a little bit of patriotism, you don't have to wait for Independence Day. You can celebrate that the other 364 days of the year in Walt Disney World.
That's right. You certainly can. So just basically, if you take anything away from this conversation that we have had in this family chat, is take a minute just to soak in some of these bits and pieces that are all around Liberty Square and all around the American Adventure and the Hall of Presidents, and just walk a little slower down Main Street to pay attention to some of the details, because there's a lot of tributes to U.S. history and patriotism everywhere to be found. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, thanks for being here. This was a really fun topic to research and learn more about.
I thought this was a lot of fun. So we'll see you next time.
Now, where was I? Yes, safety instructions. First, when entering the theater, please move as far to the end of the row as possible. Stopping in the middle is distinctly unpatriotic.
Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of Mickey, Marvel, and More. And a big thank you to Laura for hanging out with me in the family chat to talk all about U.S. history and patriotism in the American Disney theme parks. And believe it or not, there was still a whole lot we didn't even get to, like, for example, New Orleans Square in Disneyland, or the riverboat and sailing ship Columbia, also in Disneyland, as well as the tribute to historical Hollywood over in Walt Disney World at Disney Hollywood Studios. Well, the good news is we'll have some more U.S. history and patriotism to talk about in next year's July 4th episode. And hey, after listening to this episode, head on down to the show notes and check out the links to all the stories we talked about today, as well as a picture of the bubbling burglar from Disney Springs. Although, like authorities, you're going to have a very hard time identifying the person because it looks very much like Lon Chaney in The Invisible Man. You just can't really see any of their face. And while you're there in the show notes, why not comment on one of our stories or our family chat on any of our social pages? Or, if you prefer, you can use our email address, mickeymarvelandmore, all one word, @gmail.com. And if we read your comment or email on the show, you will become an official friend of the show, with all of the non-existent rights and privileges that go along with that. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, my name is Mark, and you've been listening to Mickey, Marvel, and More. If you didn't, you've been listening to old-time Hollywood producer Mike Todd Jr., and I've been explaining to you about how my magnificent technology Smell-O-Vision works. Be sure not to fall for our competitors over there that have created that second-rate technology, Aroma-Rama. I don't know what those guys are smelling. They wouldn't know a flower patch from a dirty diaper. We'll see you next time.